Hi everyone, my name is Charu and I'm a writer and journalist based in the southeastern United States and the host of a podcast called The Story with Charu. And I want to talk about some patterns that I've seen emerge over the last 2 weeks since the killing of George Floyd. So I have only gone to a protest as a reporter covering them, especially like during the second Iraq War. And in the past 7 days, I've gone to 2 Black Lives Matter protests as a participant, as a demonstrator. And the first one, which was probably the most meaningful and impactful for me personally, I actually learned about from the police department's social media pages, which is ingenious if you think about it. And when I wasn't gonna go because of COVID, and serious concerns, that thing is still here, and had decided against it. And then my husband sort of said, I think we should go, I think we should take the kids, and we did. We wore masks and we stayed out of the fray of the crowd. Well, one thing that I keep noticing is this, okay? So when that protest was announced, I noticed that on a lot of progressive Democrat type pages and places, people were saying, hey, who's organizing this? Like, what is this about? And it was like confusion. So it turned out that in both cases of the protests that I went to, the group of people organizing were actually high school students. And once it became clear who was doing what, right? Some of the Democrats came with like voter registration pamphlets and the sheets and everything. I'm all for voting. I vote every time. I vote in every election. And obviously one of the easiest things that we can do to make a change in society is vote. Whether we like the people running or not, we make the best decision over who we've got. Well, one thing that keeps emerging though for me is this tone deafness that's happening with white Democrats and white liberals who aren't really getting that there's a lot of empathy and hurt here. And what you're seeing is like this collective rage. And you kind of have to address that before you get into the politics of it. And there's a lot of sentiment that these changes are now happening without really any government leader. It's coming from the ground up. And it's this sort of like, we're going to get this done, and we're going to get it done now because we're sick of promises. This is just something that I'm kind of noticing. And I also want a high voter turnout, right? So I would really encourage people to remember to not be tone deaf. And when you come to the table to sit down to write this legislation and write these bills, which there are some in the works right now, and I've only heard bits and pieces of what they include, sit down with these organizers, okay? And the Black Lives Matter movement is very well thought out, and what they're asking for, it's very interesting because it's almost devoid of politics. It's really system changes, and you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but go look it up and go look at what they're saying. The demilitarization of police being one of the biggest ones, because we've seen this like steadily amping up of what your local police and sheriff's department has, and it's gotten worse and worse, or more and more. And the Patriot Act did a lot to kind of give them some more stuff. And then also we have this populace that's so armed. Like, how can we not have, some sides being equal? I don't know. It's a lot to think about. However, I'm just saying, sit down with the organizers to write something meaningful. Get ready for a fight on that one. But from the other side, I mean. And so anyway, I wanted to make sure that one of the things that I put out there is to come to the table already kind of knowing the history, because a lot of times what's happened, and with me personally, is that there's this expectation, well, you're a person of color and you can fill me in. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think a lot of people of color are in this place where we've tried and it didn't work, and we're exhausted. And also we have to figure out where to spend our efforts in the most productive way. So remember that. I mean, really come to the table already knowing this stuff. We can't catch you up, okay? The last thing that I kind of wanted to say was this idea of this divide and conquer. And I feel like it's really obvious that it's happening to us as the people, that there's this like effort to, divide us up and then conquer us. So they know, for example, that if you happen to be maybe on the right side of things, you may not even know someone personally that went to the protests, or your circle is very much filled with people that are like you, and you're not going to talk to somebody that did. And when they do that, they can put ideas right in your head, knowing you're never going to talk to someone else, and so we're never going to connect. And I'm looking for us to connect, because I think one of the things that has happened is we're being divided and conquered as the American people. And so we've really got to try to come out of this stronger, because this is the kind of thing that can make a nation collapse, everything that you're seeing. So either we're going to have to come out of this leading the government officials and us being the ones that get together and affect this change, or I'm telling you, we'll perish. And I have said this when I started this podcast. I've been saying it, and I hope that now we're all on the same page, for all this. I don't know, but I have to say it. This was supposed to be the last week of school. School was supposed to end for my kids on June 9th, and the last few months have been crazy, just absolutely crazy. There was no new podcast this week, and I'm not going to have one next week. I'm going to take some much needed time off and unplug and just be in nature and kind of take some time to go back and being in the present. I've heard this thing where if you dwell too much on the past, it leads to depression, and if you think too much about the future, it leads to anxiety. So we try to live in this present moment, right? So I'm going to really work on doing that. The news junkie in me finds that very difficult to do, but I'm going to try to really unplug and go out in nature. But one of the things that kind of occurred to me, I feel like after we've homeschooled, or I've homeschooled, I can do anything. That was so hard, right? So one thing that kind of hit me this week, because I want to always do more, and I feel like I'm not doing enough. I was thinking back that, and I don't know exactly where it's from, but in some part of Hindu literature, and maybe, I don't know, and I don't want to quote it wrong, and I can never find it when I need it, but my mom and dad had told me about how, if you want to corrupt somebody, you corrupt their children, because what the seeds that we kind of plant in our children, if we plant the right ones, they're fruitful for generations, right? And if we don't, we're looking at your descendants really just becoming worse off than you are. So it struck me that in this homeschooling and all the stuff we've had to do, there's a real opportunity for us to be the ones to make sure our children know the truth. I've talked a lot about one of the problems that I think we have in this nation is we've never really talked accurately about Black history. So we can do that now. It's easy to find those sources. It's easy to get that information. And I think that we're being called upon. It seems like such a little thing, right? But that's an act of resistance. Teaching your kids the truth, working with them, it all starts with education. I mean, when they did not want slaves to progress in any way, they outlawed reading or learning anything for slaves. You could be caught and punished if you taught a slave to read. That right there tells you everything you need to know about education, that how important it is, and even the act of learning and the act of education can be in fact resistance when we do it and we keep moving forward, right? So I thought about that this week, that I always want to be doing more, and I was going to be on a different forefront because homeschooling has been so hard. But it's really, we're being called upon to really make our families right now as strong as we can for our future generations. Representative John Lewis has said that the fight, it seems like we keep talking about this and it seems like it's not getting better, and he said it's going to be a fight for lifetimes. I mean, it may be lifetimes, so that's depressing in a way when you think about it, but I guess we don't really have another choice. I hope it's not lifetimes, but just in case it is. So anyway, I am going to take some time off and not put out a show and try to deplug, but I've got a huge body of work, The Story with Charu, wherever podcasts are heard. And when I come back, we're going to start season 4. So I hope that everybody gets some mental health breaks as they need them. And as we continue in this movement, in this fight, it's so important to take rest and remember that when you take a rest, somebody else can step up. Because if Representative Lewis is correct, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So take care of yourselves. See you soon.